Have you seen pearl embossing powders and wondered how to use them? Or you want to get creative and start mixing your own? Well, in today's video, I'm going to show you how to create your own custom blends with pearl embossing powders, whether that's ready-made or you use an additive like sheen from Wow Embossing Powders. Stay tuned, I will show you a selection of cards that give you a soft, beautiful Christmas cards to inspire your creativity. Hi, I'm Verity and welcome to my YouTube channel and blog Pretty Little Button, where I make paper crafting tutorials for the everyday crafter. So this video is all about pearl powders. Wow have a selection of different pearl powders of different colours, as well as a sheen in their changer collection. They also sell empty embossing pots from Wow. They come in a set of 3. These are great because they are from Wow, so you'll know that they will be, when you use them, they'll have that anti-static property. Now for the first card, we are going to use 2 pearl embossing powders that are already ready-made with Wow. So to begin with, I'm going to be adding some embossing ink through a stencil. So this stencil is the Snowflake stencil that I designed for Wow Embossing Powder that came out in the last release. I'm using my Make Art station just to keep the stencil in place over some cardstock. This cardstock is coral cardstock from Hero Arts, it's their Coral Hero Hues. And I'm just using a sponge blending tool with a clean sponge on the bottom that I always use for embossing ink. And I'm using this to transfer the ink into the stencil. There are 2 reasons why I like to do this. One of them was a tip I picked up from Daniel Diaz, because you're going to be transferring less ink onto the actual stencil and wasting less ink, so you're not leaving a lot of ink left on the stencil. In addition, it also allows you to really press into those delicate areas of a stencil like this, especially into those snowflake fronds. And you really want to make sure you cover it with ink well to make sure you get that lovely, lovely delicate design. Once I have covered that with ink, I can then remove the magnets and lift off the stencil, and you will see obviously what's like a watermark of that snowflake design. You could leave that to dry and you could create a card with that. But today we are going to do a little bit more and add some pearl embossing powders. So for the first colour, we are going to be using violet pearl embossing powder. All the pearl embossing powders are white in powder form. You cannot see the actual colour when it's not heat set. I'm using a metal spatula with my embossing powder, and I'm just sprinkling part of the pearl embossing powder all over the snowflake. It's really important that you use a metal spatula because you do not want to use a plastic spoon. That is going to reintroduce static into your powder, and that is going to take away the anti-static effect that Wow Embossing Powder does to their powders to reduce the static element of their powders. Now I'm not covering the whole snowflake in the violet pearl embossing powder. I'm just sprinkling it over some of the areas, and then I'm tipping it off just to get rid of the excess. Now the other colour I'm going to be using is white pearl embossing powder, and I'm just covering the whole snowflake in this because I just want to cover all the other areas with the white. Now with pearl embossing powders, you need to be aware that when you use it on a white cardstock or you use it on a light cardstock that is not dark like black or navy or really dark purple, you are not going to see all of the colour come through. These work best on dark cardstock, but I wanted a more softer, subtle effect to this card, and that's why I've done it on this mid-tone kind of colour cardstock. So as I'm melting the embossing powder, you'll be able to see that as it melts, that you can see sort of a purple shine. So that's the violet pearl embossing powder. You'll then also see another pearlescent shine in the light when I move it, and that's the white pearl embossing powder. You will find that when you put white pearl embossing powder over any colour cardstock, what you will get is a pearlescent powder of the coloured cardstock underneath. So we're getting a beautiful sort of almost corally peachy pearlescent powder. And this has created a really fun snowflake look, and it really catches your eye as you shine it in the light. So when somebody opens this card, as they move it in the light, they're going to see some really fun colours. So for the next set of cards, we are going to be mixing pearlescent powders and creating our own blend of a pearlescent powder. So I have here Judas Blush embossing powder. This is with the Alex Renke collaboration. Again, I'm using a metal spatula, and I'm using one of the empty pots that I got from Wow Embossing Powder. I am adding a couple of spatulas into the pot, and then I'm also taking the sheen. Now this came out with the Changes collection. So there was sheen, glisten and texture. You can buy these individually, and they're great because you can make your own powders and mixes. So I'm using the sheen, and this will give you a sort of pearlescent look to whatever colour you mix it with. So I've added the same amount of sheen into the pot, and then I'm giving it a good shake, and I shake it so much that I actually shake it off my desk. But you really want to give it a good shake to really mix those colours up. And I'm going to show you this look on two different cards. So first card is I am stamping onto the same coral cardstock. And this time I'm using the Sparkling Presents Galore background stamp set that was released in the last stamp set. Stamping that in ink a couple of times just to get a really, really good impression. You need to bear in mind the powder that I mixed the sheen with is a translucent powder. It's not an opaque powder. So as I mix this, and as I put it over the dark coloured cardstock, you are going to get a bit more of a mottled, marbling, pearlescent look to the card. This is because you will have the pearlescent powder melting over areas of cardstock, and then you will have the translucent powder melting over the cardstock. The translucent will appear a little bit more darker than the pearlescent, so you kind of get that mottled marble look to your embossing powder, and it's really, really interesting design. It's really hard to show it up on camera, unfortunately, when I have melted all the powder and I bring it to light. It's really, really hard to see in person, but believe me, it's really, really interesting look to the embossing powder in real life. It gives it some other texture, and the possibilities with this is quite endless really, because there are a whole host of translucent powders by Wild Embossing Powder that you can mix with sheen to get this fun look. Now, obviously we're using it on a mid-tone colour cardstock, so remember, we're going to get sort of a tone-on-tone look when we're doing this because we're using a sheen embossing powder. So it will give that pearlescent look to the coloured cardstock. So as you can see here, when I shine it in the light and move it in the light, you can see a beautiful soft pearlescent powder that's got that colour of the cardstock, has a little bit of pink sheen to it as well. I'm then going to also do this on white cardstock so you can see the difference and see the comparison. So again, I have stamped the same stamp set onto a background, and I had to mix up a little bit more powder because I didn't have enough for this background, and then I'm covering it again. So when you see it on the white, you can really see that blush and that pink coming through from the Judas blush from Alexander Renke. But of course, because we have mixed that pearlescent in, when I melt this will have more of a pearl look to it than if you just use that Judas blush on its own, because remember, it's translucent. So it will have more of a gloss look if you used it on its own without the sheen powder. So again, just going to run through the heat embossing of this because this is what we're here for. I'm melting it with my Speed 2 on my heat gun. And it's really starting to show that lovely, beautiful, soft pink. Now I thought when I was making this would also be perfect for a little girl's birthday card, but because I was set on Christmas cards, I turned it into a Christmas card. But think about this colour, how you could create with it and make some beautiful, beautiful girl cards with this. As you can see, when you bring it up to there, you can see it's got a beautiful soft pink, but it's got a real lovely, lovely pearlescent shine to it, rather than that glossy shine that you would get if you were just using the powder on its own. Now I'll put it side by side with the original one, and you can see the difference. You can see that you're still getting a pearlescent look to the darker cardstock with a little bit of a hint of a blush, but you're getting more of the blush on the lighter cardstock. So as I said, I was going to turn these all into Christmas cards, and I'm using a selection of the mini stamps we released in the last collection, one in July. So these are some of the sentiments. We've got Merry sentiments, Christmas sentiments, and It's the Season sentiments. And what I like to do is I usually like to position my stamps over the card panels first before I actually do any heat embossing or stamping, just so I can see the arrangement, see whether it looks right, whether I need to use a different sentiment or a different stamp set. So for the cards with the coral cardstock base, I did stamp the main script sentiments in Samba ink, and then I stamped the secondary sentiments in Twilight ink. For the blush white card, I just heat embossed in white onto the coral cardstock, and I fussy cut these all out, adding them to the card base. I also finished them off with some pearls from Lucy's Cards, and then, as you can see, this is a lovely little great collection that you could give to somebody to hand out for Christmas. They've all got this lovely, lovely shine. They've got a lovely soft look to them. They're nice and subtle, and I think it's a great alternative to your traditional bright red and white Christmas cards. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Let me know in the comments below which one out of these three is your favourite card. For me, it has to be the white with the blush pearlescent mix on the background. If you're new to the channel, why not think about subscribing? You can hit that bell icon to be notified when my next video is up. Until next time, happy crafting!